Hello everyone and welcome to Start Stitching Saturday. This is my bi-weekly video that I have started that is tutorials for both crochet and knitting. Any suggestions are welcome, so please don't forget to comment. We are going to be starting on knitting a pair of socks. Now, before you run away, I am going to be using a larger yarn. This, I think, is a 4-weight. It actually doesn't have the weight on the band yarn for this tutorial. And I'm also going to be making a pair of, well, making one sock that you can then watch the tutorial twice if you need to make a pair of socks. Much like I did for my cuffed down video. I will try to link that into the description or in this video. So let's so a couple things we need to talk about when making a wearable. The first thing that nobody wants to talk about or doesn't like hearing: you have to make a gauge swatch. If you want it to fit, you have to make a gauge swatch. Now, I had started making a hat with this yarn. I decided that I wanted to frog it, so this is the perfect time to do a gauge, because if you are making something in the round, your gauge should be in the round. And again, for this tutorial, we are just doing a knit sock with maybe some ribbing on the cuff. So I'm going to be taking my gauge from just the knit part of my in the round hat of this yarn. So I'm going to try to get closer so that you can see what I'm looking at here. So this tutorial is more going to be about setup and math. So if I understand if that's something you already are well versed in, that if you skip this video and go to the next video in a couple weeks, I completely understand. But if that's something you're not well versed in, please stick around. All right, so I tried to get the section of measuring tape, or if you're really lucky, you have one of these guys, and you get it lined up as best as you can. And within that 2-inch square or rectangle, whichever way you want to look at it, I count how many V-stitches that I have. All right, one. So try to get it lined up. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That last one's kind of there. 9. So, and ideally, I would find several places to check my gauge, but this yarn is kind of hard to read. So we're going to assume that it's 8 to 9 stitches per 2 inches, which means 4 stitches per an inch, which is about average for a 4-weight yarn. Now, you may be asking yourself, how do I know what size needles to use? Well, again, this, if you don't have one of these, it doesn't necessarily have to be Susan Bates, but this is a gauge checker, a needle size checker. Okay, still going. My phone started screaming at me that I had a little battery. You hear them used pretty interchangeably. What I like to do is I find the end of my needle, or my yarn, sorry, and I go, okay, I fold it in half, and whichever hole that bump goes through quite easily, that's the size I'm most likely to use. And that's a size 7, or also known as a 4.5 millimeter. Now, I believe that's what I was using to make this hat. So I know that's what I'm going to be using because that's what's comfortable. Sometimes what I do is I'll pick up that size needle and won't even care how many stitches I cast on. And I see how knitting with that size needle, with that yarn feels. If it doesn't feel right, I'll either go up or down a size based on what I'm doing. Now I know my needle size and I know my gauge, but what size am I waking? Right now, my daughter is asleep and I'm not about to wake her up to measure her foot. So this is what we're gonna do. This is her shoe. I am going to measure the circumference of her shoe and then I'm going to round down. Okay, so circumference of the shoe is basically 9 inches. So I know that this shoe is a little bit big on her. So I'm probably gonna say maybe 8.5 inches. So with 4 stitches per inch and 8.5 inches, 8.5 times 4 is some number. I can't do that in my head, so I'm gonna say 8 times 4 is 40 minus 8 is 32. So once I get my finished number is 32. Here's where, if you've seen my other knitting video about my rule of 4 comes into play. So in my next video, when I show you my Judy Magic Cast On, 32 divided by 4, well, that's easy, is 8. There will be 8 stitches on each needle for a grand total of 16 stitches. So that will be, again, that's it for today's video, just showing you how to do the math and get there. Now, ideally, if you're making socks for yourself, you can measure your foot outside of your shoe. And obviously, if you're making socks out of sock yarn, your gauge is gonna be more. On average, I see anywhere from 68 to 72 for socks for myself when I'm using sock yarn, just to give you an idea. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I know there wasn't actually a lot of stitching, but I hope it had a lot of information so that you had a better idea about how to start stitching a sock. See you next time.